A super duper high tech piece of equipment in a combat helicopter designed, well, for urban warfare, population pacification, a battle scarred war veteran that doubts his own sanity, a gun ho militant arm of a military industrial complex that does not care but relishes in civilian deaths and casualties and collateral damage. It is vintage 1983 Blue Thunder. Either an incredible algorithm or a weird twist of fate, I had Blue Thunder queued as something I was going to watch next because I had never seen it in all the years since it came out in 1983 till now. And it just so happened that somebody commented on a review I did of Airwolf, the series from almost a couple years ago, and didn't like my critique on it. And it was just weird because of the relationship of the two and the coincidence. Airwolf is very much in the same vein. Now, according to the sources you can find online, Airwolf which came out later, was actually in production around the time that Blue Thunder came out. So it is really unclear as to where these things overlap. As you often happen with, as I've commented before, the great movie Deep Impact, which is right around the time of Armageddon, which is not nearly as good, but featured Bruce Willis. Sometimes you have these similar stories pop out at a similar time. Blue Thunder, I had heard about it, and to the best of my recollection, I should say, I've never seen it. If I saw it or any part of it on TV back in the day when it was brought to broadcast television, I can't swear to. None of it was familiar. Roy Scheider, who was the captain of the submarine in Sequest, DSV, I almost blinked. I always almost say Deep Space Nine every time I get there. Roy Scheider, fine actor. Malcolm McDowell, which I think Malcolm McDowell personally is one of the great actors of the last 50 years or more. Just a fabulous actor. He's great in everything that he does. Caligula, classic movie, infamous for the sexuality of it. But what an amazing job he does as Caligula. What an amazing job he does in movies like A Clockwork Orange. If it's weird and outlandish, he will nail it. And everything he does well. Candy Clark, Jason Bernard, who would go on to be the Nightshade, the retired superhero in the Flash TV series of the early 90s. Also, he was in V, of course, as the father of the two boys, the Doctor and Elias. Blanking on all that right now. Now, interestingly, I had done a negative review about Airwolf because as much as I had enjoyed it as a kid, it is obviously unrealistic. A helicopter that breaks the sound barrier, the things that it does that are just the idea of Stringfellow Hawk, the guy who happens to be a millionaire, happens to know everything about art, happens to be a combat pilot, happens to have a weird name like Stringfellow, and he plays a stringed instrument. Really ridiculous, over the top. Blue Thunder is a lot more realistic of a story and a more realistic device. Blue Thunder, in fact, it was very underwhelming. It might have been impressive in 1983, watching it now, having the minigun, the mounted, fully automatic minigun, the type of thing that Jesse Ventura carries around in Predator, which is also rather unrealistic. It would knock you in your behind. But having that sort of weapon linked to the headset so that where you look, you can be aiming the weapon. That video games were already doing that. Now, obviously, it's a more high-tech version of this mounted on this helicopter. You're not trying to shoot the dog in Duck Hunt on your Nintendo, which you actually wouldn't do till a few years after 1983. Nevertheless, it's not that earth-shattering of a technology, but it is a technology that makes a lot of sense. We since then have developed smart bombs and smart bombs on drones and a lot of this remote technology and a lot of the ordnance that is used. You want to be precise. What Blue Thunder was designed to do, urban pacification. They wanted to fly over a populated area where maybe there were terrorists leading a revolt, a riot going on, possibly, to be able to target individual people with a degree of accuracy to take out the bad guys without taking out the crowd. For that minigun is about as large of an ordnance as you're going to want to use if you want to be able to shoot someone standing next to another person. That's going to do a lot of damage. One of those rounds making contact, there's going to be splatter, but it is at least feasible to pick people out of a crowd with it. And this high-tech version of this precise remote control technology, which doesn't even appear to be wireless, to have this helmet on in the cockpit and be able to do that, it is very plausible. Now, sort of the footnote for the movie, for the film, is that Roy Scheider's character is mentally scarred from his activities in the Vietnam War. We get some sort of vague flashbacks of civilians possibly being killed, prisoners being thrown out of helicopters, and how he was not cool with that. Malcolm McDowell is the villain in this, the guy who works for the government doing this project with the helicopter for urban pacification. And apparently the history together is that his character had at one point reported Roy Scheider for cowardice because he so vehemently disapproved of his disapproval of killing civilians and throwing prisoners out of helicopters. 1983, this is the essence of Cold War paranoia. It's the essence of a nation recovering from the Vietnam War. Given any sort of tragedies that happen in war, Blue Thunder and this part of the plot is timeless. At the same time, however, it's very much a product of its time, meaning to watch it in any time frame, knowing what war is or about war, even in a fictional setting, you can relate to these people, as good fiction does. But really, they're written for 1983, when people still had these strong emotion, passion-filled feelings about the Vietnam War and about things like whether they really occurred or not. I'm not even going to, whether people really mowed down civilians or any kind of atrocities happened or any of that stuff, which is just as likely to be propaganda, fable. I'm not taking a position. I wasn't there. Nevertheless, the feeling of that perception of the war as dirty and atrocious and blaming the military-industrial complex and so on, that is very prescient still in 1983. And for the adult crowd they're aiming at, who now has kids that they might take to a movie like this is your target audience. They felt something like that about that war, one way or the other. Heck, by giving you the villain, Malcolm McDowell, even if you were really gung-ho and you were an over-the-top pro-war hawk, you might have decided that he was trying to do the right thing and you hated the damn liberal ending of the movie. Nevertheless, it is very much rooted to that time and that audience, though the larger theme is timeless. In the end, the idea, of course, it works out that they're not just designing this weapon to be used for a good purpose. They're not designing it to pick out terrorists. They are willing to, apparently they're trying, shadow government forces are literally trying to start a riot or a terror attack. They're trying to cause violence in the barrio so that they can fly over and test their new weapon, gunning down people allegedly because they have it coming. Roy Scheider decides to stop. He unravels the plot, exposes all of them. Of course, it is 1983. As much as you're going to be critical of the military-industrial complex, once exposed, they're all arrested and they're going to be dealt with. And he lands the helicopter, Blue Thunder, interestingly, on a railroad. He lands it in front of a train so that it gets destroyed, which is not particularly safe for the people on the train. Though we imagine that they just plow through anything, I felt like that was kind of a dumb way to dispose of the weapon. But it worked out, of course. Everybody lived happily ever after. He himself walks away from the wreck, and he feels some sort of closure, both in regards to having been bullied by Malcolm McDowell's character in Vietnam and since being anti-war, having these negative feelings that he needed to atone for something he was part of and disagreed with. It all sort of comes together to this happy ending. So it's I don't know how to put it, it's a really good movie, but it could have been better. And I really don't know exactly how to define that. Malcolm McDowell, fabulous actor. The character he's given, the dialogue written for him, he comes across as a really one-dimensional villain. And Roy Scheider did better stuff through the run of, I almost said Deep Space Nine again, Sequest DSV. He did better acting there than he gets really an opportunity to do here. He turns stoic in the moments when he could be more emotive. And maybe he's supposed to because he's scarred, but somehow or another at the end of the movie, I was like, there's not a lot of deviation in the plot. They don't get lost anywhere. It's a nice, tight, concise, basic good and evil story. Some of it, may be politically dated. And it just felt like something was lacking. Something was lacking in that mystical, whatever the spice that drives the engine, whatever the chutzpah, whatever you want to call it, whatever makes something go from good to great. It just didn't feel like it's not. I enjoyed the movie. It's not something I would watch over and over. I probably won't watch it again, but it is neat that it had that cohesive story. It ends up being this nice soldierly redemption arc. At the same time, it's high tech, pointing towards the future, though we're well beyond the future that it's pointing to. Nevertheless, it's entertaining, and it does come across a lot more realistic than Airwolf. Not to pick on Airwolf, but because the weird overlap of that. The helicopter doesn't do anything. Well, he does an upside down full loop, which they say is impossible, and that's part of the story in the movie. But they don't do anything ridiculously outlandish, like fire starbursts off that blow up giant warships in the distance. They don't fly at supersonic speeds. They don't hide it in a cave in a desert where nobody can find it at a time when spy satellites can watch you pee in your backyard because it's the Cold War. Anyway, I'll pick on Airwolf again some other time. But Blue Thunder is a realistic helicopter. It's a realistic technology. It's a realistic application of the technology. And then this regular sort of standard story of these war veterans working out their various issues with one another about patriotism and these messages that are timeless and yet dated, specific to the era. It works out very well that it's a solid, good movie. But whatever that extra something is, it's just not a great movie. So, have you seen Blue Thunder? What did you think about it? Am I all wet? Is it better than I say? Is it worse than I say? You really love Airwolf and now you're mad at me? I mean, I enjoyed it too as a kid. Let me know below, and we'll see you next time.